At 2:16 p.m., someone laughed in the town square of San Martín de la Sombra. Not loudly, just a short, everyday laugh, the kind that fades into the air without meaning. A rubber ball bounced twice on the dirt and tapped against a wooden bench. A man lifted his hand to catch it before it rolled into the street. A woman turned her head as the wind carried the smell of burning bread from the community oven. A dog pulled at its chain and barked at nothing. At 2:17 p.m., everything stopped mid-gesture. The ball was still in the air when it ceased to exist there. It didn't fall. It didn't roll. It wasn't caught. The man didn't finish the movement. The woman didn't finish turning her head. The dog didn't finish the bark. The entire village was interrupted in the same second, not as escape, not as death, not as evacuation, as removal. When the trucks arrived 15 minutes later, the bread was still burning in the oven. Pots were boiling. Doors were open. The grocery store radio repeated a local ad. In the square, the ball lay on the ground, but no one remembered seeing it fall. There were no running footprints, no drag marks, no bodies. 182 people had disappeared from where they were standing. A few weren't missing. All of them were. There was a chair overturned, as if someone had been taken from it without standing up. There was a school notebook open with the sentence interrupted. At 2:17 p.m., everyone. There were coins scattered across the counter, still spinning when they were found. There was a chained dog pulling until its paws bled, barking at a door that remained open. And there were footprints, hundreds of them, all going in the same direction, all stopping at the same point, as if the ground had decided that from there on, no one existed. Before we go any further, hit like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications because what happened in San Martín de la Sombra didn't stay where it happened. And drop a comment below telling me what city you're watching from, because there's a detail in this case that starts to feel wrong once you realize that the minute doesn't belong only to this village. When the first patrol entered San Martín, the silence wasn't the absence of sound. It was sustained interruption. Sergeant Alvarez opened the door to the grocery store and the coins were still spinning on the counter, turning slower and slower, as if time had continued only for the metal. The digital scale was still on. A torn bag of salt lay open. On the floor, a trail of flour marked footsteps that never finished. At the clinic, 2 syringes sat prepared on a steel tray. The cotton was still damp. The medical chart had a name written and a timestamp stamped beside it, 2:16 p.m. The next line, time of administration, was blank. The pen was pressed against the paper, as if the hand had been removed in the instant of writing. At the school, the teacher had written the date on the board and started a sentence. At 2:17 p.m., everyone. The chalk snapped mid-word. The smaller piece lay on the floor beside a woman's shoe left behind in the act of standing. There was no blood, no dragging. Just interruption too clean to be natural. In the square, the public clock read 2:17 p.m., and every clock found afterward showed the same minute, not stopped by malfunction, stopped at the same point, as if the entire village had been pierced by a moment that never finished. 3 days later, search teams found the footprints, hundreds of them, men, women, children, all converging toward a flat stretch of road 300 yards beyond the last house, and all ceasing at the same sharp line, with no continuation, no detour, no return. As if the ground had opened without opening, and when a forensic tech knelt to measure the last print, the soil gave way by a millimeter beneath his knee, and returned, as if something were still down there. The roadblock was set before nightfall, at the point where the dirt road narrowed between 2 dry hillsides and forced any vehicle to slow down. 4 patrol units lined up without headlights, engines running, as if the air ahead itself needed to be observed before crossing it. No one spoke loudly. There was no tactical reason for silence. It was instinctive. The village ahead was intact. What was missing wasn't infrastructure. It was people. All of them. Lieutenant Irusta ordered the advance on foot. The first detail reported wasn't visual. It was the absence of small life. No flies in the trash, no insects in the air, no crickets. It was a hot, late afternoon. The silence wasn't rural stillness, it was environmental suspension, as if the place had lost not only its inhabitants, but its right to remain organic. The rusted sign appeared. Welcome to San Martín de la Sombra, 0.7 miles. Just beyond it, the first tire tracks entering town. Clear. Recent. The same tread pattern repeated. No tracks exiting, not erased, not overlapped, simply non-existent. Irusta ordered photographs before allowing any vehicle forward. The road looked like it had been used in one direction only, and then sealed. The first open house had a door tapping lightly against its frame. There wasn't enough wind to explain it. Inside, the table was set for 3. A fourth plate sat apart on the counter, a mug of coffee darkening. A chair tipped over, not like a struggle, but like the abrupt absence of whoever had been sitting there. On the floor, a child's sock, sole dirty, abandoned mid-movement. In the kitchen, the wood stove was still burning, a real flame, consuming. A knife with onion residue clinging to the blade. A battery-powered radio emitting low static. Irusta switched it off. The static continued for a fraction of a second before dying. The silence that followed brought no relief. It brought density. The team moved toward the square. Small, wooden bench, central tree. The public clock read 2:17 p.m. At the school, doors open, notebooks on desks. The sentence on the board cut short. Broken chalk on the floor. A woman's shoe left behind. No sign of hurry. No sign of struggle. Only simultaneous interruption. Alvarez entered the clinic. The generator was running. The vaccine refrigerator hummed steadily. 2 prepared syringes. Damp cotton. Medical chart. Lucia M. Stamped 2:16 p.m. The next line blank. The pen pressed into the paper, as if the hand had been removed during the act of recording the next minute. In the grocery store, coins lay scattered across the counter. One was still spinning slowly when Alvarez walked in. A bag of flour stood open. A chicken thawing outside the freezer. A customer's signature interrupted in the store ledger, ink still glossy. On the wall, a calendar with a pen circle around a single number, 217, not a holiday, not a meeting. An isolated marking. The chained dog on the main street pulled until its paws tore. It didn't bark at the officers. It barked at the open door of the house behind it. Trembling, retreating, lunging again. When a soldier unclipped the chain, the animal didn't run. It stayed fixed in the same direction, as if the air at that point still held something that hadn't left. The team followed the road out of town. 300 yards ahead, they found the boundary. Footprints. Hundreds. Adults. Children. Different souls, some barefoot. All converging, all stopping at the same line. Beyond the line, clean ground. No stray steps, no detours, no return. As if movement had been cut in space. Alvarez knelt to measure the depth of the final print. The soil yielded slightly under his weight, more than it should have for that level of compaction. It didn't collapse, it just gave and returned. He lifted his knee. The ground remained unchanged, but the sensation of support wasn't normal. It felt like stepping on something that wasn't there. At 11:06 p.m., the patrol radio picked up a sharp crackle, then 2 seconds of transmission. Origin, inside the village. There was no active transmitter. The voice was clear, emotionless, without background noise. Don't look. The silence that followed was immediate, as if the place itself had been waiting for the message to finish. Irusta returned to the school to collect materials. Beneath the teacher's desk, he found an old cassette recorder. The reels were spinning silently. He pressed stop. The counter froze at a fixed number. 217. When he opened the compartment, there was no tape inside. The mechanism had been turning empty until it stopped at that minute. and for the first time since arrival, Irusta felt something physical. The village wasn't simply abandoned, it was being maintained. The San Martin de la Sombra report began at 2:13 a.m. the following morning, under the cold light of a temporary command post, on pages that would never receive official numbering. There was no applicable category. It wasn't a conventional crime, not a natural disaster, not an evacuation, not an outbreak. Bureaucratic language tried to describe what had remained: a functioning village, total absence of inhabitants, converging footprints, simultaneous interruption of activity. What didn't fit on paper was what the place continued to do. The perimeter was expanded to 12 miles. No one was found outside it. No trace beyond 2:17 p.m. Villagers' cell phones showed active connections until 2:16:59 p.m. and total absence starting at 2:17:04 p.m. Not shutdown, not gradual signal loss. Absence of origin, as if the devices had stayed where they were, but the user had been removed from the physical equation. Alvarez returned to the footprint line with casting material. The final impressions were deeper than the others. Vertical compression incompatible with walking or running. No push-off, no jump. The weight had increased on the last step and then ceased. He wrote anomalous compression and crossed out the word that had surfaced before it: piston. At the clinic, Lucia M's chart revealed, under angled light, a second pressure mark on the paper without ink. 2:17 p.m. Not written, imprinted by an interrupted gesture. As if the hand had tried to complete the minute and been removed mid-act. The pen remained uncapped, the cotton still damp, the body absent. The priest found in the church was neither dead nor functionally alive. Weak pulse, eyes open, no response to stimuli. The heart monitor showed a stable pattern until 2:17 p.m. the next day, when it spiked suddenly for 60 seconds. His lips moved. No sound emerged. After the minute passed, his state returned. The phenomenon repeated on the third day. The hospital classified it as a temporally linked reaction to the event. In the grocery store, the calendar circled at 2:17 was analyzed. The ink dated back days earlier, not marked afterward. When the page was removed, technicians found a small cavity in the wall. Inside, a fragment of broken cassette tape. Partially recovered, the audio contained ambient square noise and an adult voice saying, "When it hits 2:17, no one." Abrupt cut. The voice didn't match any of the 182 residents. The radio that transmitted "Don't Look" was dismantled. No malfunction. Spectrum analysis indicated a source originating from the geographic position of the village, with intensity incompatible with a portable transmitter. As if the space itself had emitted the phrase using the device only as a surface. The final report retained, source undetermined. Numbered houses revealed uniform domestic interruption. Toothbrushes with dried foam. Plates with food still pliable. Laundry mid-fold. In 12 homes, wristwatches stopped at 2:17 p.m. In 5, watches functioning normally but showing micro-desynchronization after that minute. In 2, tape recorders running without tape, spinning empty. In the cemetery, no graves were disturbed. Even so, 3 recent headstones showed slight soil subsidence at the front edge. Recent compression without visible load. Old dead, not part of the 182. The place registered the event even where absence already existed. At 11:20 a.m., an acoustics specialist mapped residual noise. At certain points in the village, microphones captured pulses below the threshold of hearing, recurring at 60-second intervals. Each pulse coincided with the repetition of the minute on stop devices. The place maintained an invisible metronome. Irusta ordered reconstruction of the final 120 seconds before 2:17 p.m. Estimated positions. Projected paths. The map revealed spontaneous convergence of individuals with no connection. Teacher, baker, 2 children, mechanic, clinic attendant. Not a meeting. Not a flight. Simultaneous attraction without visible command. The grocery store tape fragment, enhanced, revealed an earlier unnoticed detail. Ambient sound ceased 0.2 seconds before the physical cut. There was no transition. The soundscape simply stopped before the material rupture. On the fourth day, beneath the school floorboards, an unmarked envelope was found. Inside, a list of 182 names. Every resident. Beside each name, an empty square. Only one filled in, 217. The list had been prepared beforehand. Complete. The minute marked afterward. The provisional report concluded. Total absence without conventional mechanism. Convergence of individuals to a single point. Evidence of pre-event temporal marking. Recommendation: isolate and do not disclose. The following dawn, the priest again spiked at 2:17 p.m. This time, cameras captured his lips more clearly. 2 syllables repeated, not a common word. A short, open-closed structure. Duration matching the "don't look" transmission. The body reacted to the minute as the earth reacted to pressure. Village devices continued registering the minute. Tape recorders without tape stopped at 2:17. Clocks slowed as they approached it. The infrasonic metronome persisted. The village wasn't merely preserved, it was operating, and someone had marked the minute in advance. The first indication that San Martín de la Sombra wasn't unique didn't come from an official archive. It came from human memory. An analyst assigned to review the raw material recognized the number before the place. 2:17 p.m. He had seen that minute months earlier in another forgotten file, an Andean settlement called Alto del Silencio, where 31 people had ceased activity in the same second. No exit trails, no bodies, no witnesses. At the time, the case had been archived as an isolated occurrence. The analyst opened both files side by side. The minute matched. Photographs from Alto del Silencio showed the same type of domestic interruption. A pot on the stove, a bench overturned, a notebook open with an unfinished sentence. A public clock stopped. In the chapel, a calendar circled around a single number. 2:17, marked days before. No one had understood it when the village ceased. Now it was a pattern. Other smaller files surfaced. A logging camp with 7 workers absent at the same minute. A rural school where a teacher and 2 children were interrupted mid-writing. A mining outpost with tools abandoned and a radio emitting continuous static without an operator. In each case, the record converged, 2:17 p.m. local time, not universal time. The event respected the clock of the place. Irusta received the parallel dossiers. What struck him weren't the numbers, it was the images. In Alto del Silencio, the footprints ended the same way. Convergence to a point, clean cessation beyond it. In the logging camp, boots aligned at the edge of compressed earth. In the rural school, 3 chairs slightly pushed back, as if bodies had been removed from the space they occupied. The repetition wasn't statistical, it was physical. Audio recovered in Alto del Silencio contained a fragment similar to the one from San Martín. An adult voice beginning a phrase, "when," then abrupt silence before completion. The spectral pattern matched the "don't look" transmission. Not the same speaker, the same type of emission. As if the sentence didn't originate in a human throat, but in a mechanism that used the voice only as format. In San Martín, devices continued registering the minute. Clocks that had been reset slowed subtly as they approached 2:17 p.m. Tape recorders without cassettes stopped at the same counter. The infrasonic metronome persisted in the ground and structures. The village kept the minute active even while empty. The search for prior markings revealed repetition elsewhere. In Alto del Silencio, children's drawings included the number beside houses and sun figures. At the logging camp, a scrap of wood had 2:17 carved into it with a knife. At the mining outpost, a shift log listed the minute alone. None of those places had any communal reason to mark that time. The minute had been planted in daily life before the collapse. A geologist compared soil samples from the cessation points. In all cases, there was anomalous vertical compression in the top layer and abrupt density alteration just beneath it. Not a cavern, not a detectable void. It was as if the ground structure had been momentarily removed and recomposed. The analogy written and crossed out in 3 separate reports was the same. Piston. The young analyst uncovered an old letter never linked to Alto del Silencio. No addressee. Stored beneath a stone in the chapel. The text was short. If you're reading this, it's already marked. Don't try to stop it. At 2:17 p.m., no one stays. Dated 3 days before the event. In San Martin, the envelope listing 182 names with the minute marked repeated the structure. Someone had known beforehand. By the second week, protocols changed. No agent was to remain at a cessation point between 2:15 and 2:19 p.m. The rule followed an undisclosed incident. A technician stayed inside the San Martin school during the minute to observe devices. The video showed 0.6 seconds of freeze in his movement, not hesitation, interruption, followed by immediate continuation and a dropped object. His portable heart monitor recorded a missing beat at the same instant. He described the sensation as loss of continuity. The pattern now had 3 clear layers, recurring minute across multiple locations. Pre-event marking of the minute. Residual response in matter and bodies during the minute itself. What remained unidentified was the agent. Not a person, not a group, not a classified phenomenon. The minute operated. The place responded. The people were removed. Irusta studied the enlarged photograph from the first night in San Martin. Among the hundreds of converging footprints, one was different. Larger sole. Asymmetrical wear along the outer edge, imprinted at an angle opposite the others, pointing away from the cessation point before the stop. That print did not appear in later images, only in the first. Someone had been at the point and left before the minute. He cross-referenced files. In Alto del Silencio, a single unmatched footprint had been recorded and dismissed. At the logging camp, one boot appeared outside the final alignment. In every location, there was a minimal indication of a presence not removed. It wasn't the event that left survivors. It was someone who never entered. In the empty square of San Martin, the public clock cast a fixed shadow. Irusta noticed slight deformation in the mine at hand at 2:17, as if it had suffered localized heat without fire. The object's time had been affected by the minute, not mechanical failure, contact. The informal conclusion, never written into any report, was direct. The event wasn't an explosion or random absorption. It was interaction at a specific point in a specific minute. Something operated at the edge of the soil, and in each occurrence, someone did not cross. Irusta slipped the photograph of the different footprint into his vest pocket. If the pattern was real, the next step wasn't in the files. It was at the line. On the 18th day, San Martin's perimeter changed without announcement. Engineers arrived with pressure sensors, metal plates, and ground-penetrating radar. The written order posted at the command post was brief. No one remains on the line between 2:15 and 2:19 p.m. It wasn't a standard precautionary protocol. It was a response to what the place had already done. The footprint line was cordoned off. The plates were installed in a grid over the cessation point. Each calibrated to register minimal load variation. At 1:50 p.m., the sensors were stable. By 2:10 p.m., they began oscillating in 60-second cycles. The center of the line reacted more strongly. The soil pulsed before the minute. At 2:14 p.m., the team withdrew beyond the marked zone. A low-frequency acoustic emitter was left at the center of the grid. It produced no audible sound, only pressure. The operator remained 50 yards away behind an armored vehicle, finger on the switch. The village stayed without insects, without birds, without wind. The silence felt structural. At 2:16 p.m., the operator activated the emitter for 10 seconds. The plates reacted immediately, bending inward by millimeters. The peak did not disappear when the emitter shut off. The deformation remained, as if the soil had found something beneath it to brace against. 2:17 p.m. arrived. The plates were pulled downward simultaneously. They didn't sink. They were tensioned, like a surface stretched over a rigid cavity. Thermal cameras recorded an instantaneous drop in temperature in a circle roughly 20 inches wide. The operator behind the armored vehicle dropped to his knees without shouting. A soldier ran toward him and stumbled mid-stride at the same point in motion, as if time had failed for a fraction. 3 cameras recorded the same corrupted frame, a gray square with no data for less than a second. When the minute ended, the operator resumed speaking. His statement was simple: "I lost continuity." The next test brought the radar online. Down to 5 feet, nothing. At 6 feet, a circular zone returned no signal. Not a cavern, not a detectable void. Absence of response. The point was marked. A metal probe was inserted. It slid down easily and stopped abruptly, as if striking something rigid and invisible. It rotated once. Locked. At 2:16 p.m. the following day, the probe began vibrating on its own. Dark, damp soil rose adhered to the metal, incompatible with the dry surface layer. The operator pulled hard. The probe rose 2 inches and was pulled back down. 2:17 p.m. The probe descended on its own, fast as if captured. The operator was dragged 1 step toward the line, froze for a fraction, let go. The probe vanished. The surface closed without a hole. The marking paint was drawn inward in a thin thread, leaving only a streak pointing to the center. Sensors recorded the strongest pulse yet. A ground microphone captured, beyond the now familiar crack, a complete sentence. "Now look." When the minute ended, the point was intact. No opening, no probe, only the footprint line as before. The operator insisted he had seen the paint sink. The commanding officer ordered immediate evacuation and seizure of all data. On the way out, an engineer noticed the streak of paint pointed toward the brush beyond the perimeter. The direction matched the area outside containment. Advancing was prohibited immediately. A memorandum drafted on the spot classified any access beyond the line as operational violation. That night, digital clocks in the command post displayed 2:17 p.m. for 3 seconds, though it was 4:02 p.m. None froze. They simply showed the minute and returned to the correct time. Video footage captured only compressed audio and the dry crack. The dragged operator developed a circular mark around his ankle, no wound, matching the diameter of the radar's anomaly zone. He didn't remember contact, only gripping the probe, and then kneeling with dark soil under his fingernails. The sample collected lost moisture within minutes, turning into fine gray powder. Irusta reviewed the first night photographs again. A single footprint outside the pattern, larger sole, outer edge wear, opposite direction. Presence prior to cessation, not removed. Before dawn, an envelope was slid under his door. Inside, a single sentence: 217 did not take everyone, and a map marking a point in the brush beyond the line. The map showed no known trails or official boundaries. It reduced San Martin de la Sombra to dry lines: square, school, grocery store, footprint line. Beyond it, dense brush sketched in rough strokes. Within the vegetation, a point marked with the same thin line as the paint that had been drawn into the earth. In the corner of the paper, repeated 217. The sentence from the envelope remained short and physical. 217 did not take everyone. Irusta entered the brush before dawn. No team, no radio. The photograph of the isolated footprint in his inner pocket. The vegetation was low and thorned. The rocky soil showed irregular depressions, as if someone had knelt there repeatedly. At the center, buried shallow, lay a narrow wooden board. Beside it, a strip of cassette tape wound around a nail, not discarded, protected beneath branches. The underside of the board bore carvings, 12 vertical marks crossed by a short horizontal line. The same symbol that appeared beside a single name on the list of 182. Tally. Repetition. Record of occurrence. It wasn't a communal object. It was clandestine memory. Irusta brought the tape to the makeshift lab. Restored, the audio carried a human voice, whispered, cut by static. "If you find this, don't stay. 217 doesn't take everyone. Look down. Before." The timbre partially matched recordings of the missing baker. The phrase existed before the event, or outside it. Either way, someone in the village knew the minute did not affect everything. The enlarged footprint confirmed a larger soul with outer edge wear. No match among the 182. Direction away from the point before cessation. Presence prior to the line. At 1:30 p.m., the command post received orders for permanent withdrawal. Perimeter sealed indefinitely. Operational closure. Any material outside official channels would disappear. At 2:09 p.m., Irusta crossed the tape and followed the map to the marked point in the brush. The soil there felt colder, darker, compacted differently. He lay down and pressed his ear to the ground. The infrasonic 60-second pulse was stronger there than at the line, the village's metronome. He placed his hand flat. The earth answered with temperature lower than ambient air. 2:16:30 p.m. The pulse accelerated. The tape's phrase echoed in memory. Look down. Before. Irusta kept his eyes on the soil. 2:16:58 p.m. The surface gave by a millimeter, not a crack, an outline. A small circle traced itself, a border without rupture. 2:17 p.m. Continuity failed. The outline opened without opening a hole. Below it was no visible void, no cavity. There was absence of form, a space that did not return surface. At the threshold, something moved without emerging, a shadow without projection upward. Irusta did not look around. He looked down. Inside the outline, for less than a second, the tips of feet appeared, multiple, aligned, as if resting on an invisible step. Not bodies, not legs, only the human contact with the edge of space. Among them, one larger soul with outer wear, the isolated footprint. That one did not advance. It remained outside the alignment. The emission came without air, without radio, without throat, directly through the soil. Now look. The command was not for Irusta. It was for those aligned. The internal shadow withdrew. The toes vanished. The outline sealed like skin. The pulse stopped. Irusta was pulled forward by an inch during the closure. His weight shifted. He fell to his knees outside the point. His watch read 2:18 p.m. The earth was smooth again. At the center where the outline had formed, an object remained that had not been there before. A perforated copper coin, hand-engraved, 217 on one side. On the other, the same tally symbol carved into the board. Irusta picked it up. As he rose, he felt a faint traction around his right ankle. The soil released. No hole, no visible mark. He emerged from the brush at 2:25 p.m. The perimeter was already being dismantled. The village would be sealed permanently. The final report would exclude the edge, the tape, the board, the coin, the different footprint. That night, the skin around Irusta's ankle showed a pale circle. No wound. The exact diameter of the outline detected by radar. It did not hurt. It did not inflame. It remained cold to the touch. The official closure recorded total absence of 182 individuals, cause undetermined, permanent perimeter. The real material remained outside. Months later, transferred elsewhere, Irusta noticed a new pattern. At 2:17 p.m., his right step delayed by an imperceptible instant before touching ground. Not muscle failure, not pain, minimal discontinuity. The same delay recorded in the school technician, the same freeze in the probe operator. The minute had not ended in San Martin. The coin remained in his pocket. On certain days at 2:17 p.m., the metal cooled without thermal cause. His wristwatch hesitated a second before crossing the minute. The report that does not exist never registered the point in the brush, but the board had 12 marks, and the next one had not yet been carved. If you made it this far, hit like, subscribe, turn on notifications, and comment what city you're watching from. Because 217 doesn't belong to a single village. It belongs to the place where the ground decides that, for 1 minute, not everyone continues.